Neil Degrasse Tyson.
Whatever is your concept, the discoveries of astrophysicists bring you closer to it.
Ligma, what you ask?
Is a scientist. Oh, cure for science? For cancer? Huh, no, not quite yet, Walter.
Ligma ball.
Huh, oh. But sometimes the cellular scientists exit their cellular laboratory and go into the field of philosophy. But just because you're really good at one thing doesn't necessarily mean you will be really good at the other. Scientists are wonderful at all sorts of wonderful little things like curing diseases, whether or not it's a male disease with a vaccine or a female disease with birth control, as well as other silly little things like bombing foreigners that we don't give a toss about. Just because scientists are good at doing these things doesn't necessarily mean they are also good at philosophy. Similarly, just because, theologians are good at what they do, it doesn't also mean that they are good at science. Everyone specializes in their field, and whether or not they can transfer from one lane into another is majorly just dependent upon that individual's competency. So, me and Neil are both exiting our lanes. He's exiting science and I'm exiting theology, and we're entering into philosophy. Today we're reacting to a video by Minute Physics. If you don't know what they're like, then go check them out. I have a friend who really likes them, and I don't care. And Neil features on the channel and is asked the question, does the universe have a purpose? Ooh boy, we're gonna reflect on his answers and just see where we go from there.
Does the universe have a purpose?
Does the universe have a purpose? This is a question about teleology. Teleology, put simply, is the explanation of things in terms of their purpose. Now, it would be good if we asked the question, what is purpose, so that we could understand the question more broadly. Also, simply, we could say that purpose is that which something is created to do. And so to ask whether or not the universe has a purpose is also to ask, what was the universe created to do? What was the goal that the universe was created to fulfill? Now, I would also like to ask another question as to what is the nature of purpose. Is purpose something that can exist intrinsically within the thing, or can purpose only exist when it has been bestowed onto the thing? Does this stick of incense have purpose intrinsically within the nature of itself, or does it only have purpose because an outside force has determined it so? These are hopefully questions we'll be able to answer as we go.
Anyone who expresses a more definitive response to the question
What is the purpose
claiming
of the universe?
access to knowledge not based in empirical foundations.
Yes, this is true. Anyone who does claim access to knowledge to answer a question like the purpose of things is claiming knowledge outside of the foundations of empiricism. It's true, but it's also said in such a way that I think assumes a bunch of different things. So generally speaking, I think Neil is assuming a philosophical branch of thought called empiricism. If you don't know what empiricism is, basically it argues that true knowledge is accessed through sense experience. That is your taste, smell, sight, hearing, touch. And that through these, you are able to grasp onto true knowledge. And so this is what the scientific enterprise, as far as I'm aware, has kind of been built off of, as the means of knowledge is observation and experimentation through the sense experience. Now, from the phrasing of Neil's statement, I'm also assuming that he assumes that empiricism is the big sugar daddy of knowledge. You're not an empiricist like I am? You can't have true knowledge because you didn't sense experience it. But as Descartes, a rationalist, once said, sense experience is for beta cars and isn't always reliable. What I'm saying is that I concur that in the right field, empiricism is very useful. If you're practicing science, empiricism is the exact philosophical branch you want to use. As how the hell are you going to know anything about the nature of chemicals through logical processes? However, when you're asking a question such as what is the purpose of the universe, suddenly empiricism is not the right means towards answering that question. Neil's complaining that anyone who tries to answer the question is going outside empiricism. My complaint is, no duh. You necessarily need to go beyond empiricism in order to answer a teleological question, because teleology and empiricism don't really talk to each other. Empiricism assumes no teleology. And so yes, the rationalists are more likely to be able to answer this question, and the religious especially, are more equipped to answer these questions. But we'll see what Neil has to say after that.
This remarkably persistent way of thinking, common to most religions and some branches of philosophy, has failed badly in past efforts to understand and thereby predict the operations of the universe and our place within it.
No, this is an interesting point that Neil's making, because I think it demonstrates more of what he's assuming. I think he's assuming that because these branches of philosophy and most religions do not grant access to the operations of the universe, therefore their means towards true knowledge is inferior and not as effective towards factual outcomes. If your discipline can't understand and explain the operations of the universe, then it is not fit to answer a question as to the purpose of the universe. I think that what Neil is saying is a moot point, as the purpose of these disciplines, let's say rationalism and the various theological practices, or religion just full stop, because he's not talking about theology, he just talks about religion. The purpose of these schools of thought is not to explain the operations of the universe. If what Neil wants is a discipline that understands the mechanics of the universe, then he's doing a great job going into the sciences. But to complain about the religions and some branches of philosophy, the purpose of, let's say, the Bible is to express a theological message, not a scientific one. And so I would agree with Neil if he was complaining about, let's say, folks who did use the Bible as a means towards explaining the mechanics of the universe. I concur that that was silly and not correct. However, that's not a problem with the Bible or Christianity. That's a problem with the people who have practiced it, who have used these sources to practice the wrong discipline. Let's think about our theological method for a moment, the Wesleyan quadrilateral. That is a method that appeals to scripture, tradition, reason, and experience as a means towards theological practice. But you can't apply that same methodology to a scientific practice. So for Neil to criticize these other schools of thought for not explaining the mechanics of the universe is, generally speaking, to criticize them for not doing science, when in all reality that wasn't what they were supposed to do in the first place, and when it was used to do science, that was bad practice. You can't criticize something for being insufficient at explaining that which it was never designed to explain.
To assert that the universe has a purpose implies a desired outcome. But who would do the desiring? And what would a desired outcome be?
These are good questions. So I think these questions that Neil is asking do follow necessarily from the ultimate question, does the universe have a purpose? As he's asking sub-questions in order to understand the primary question.
That carbon-based life is inevitable? Or that sentient primates are life's neurological pinnacle? Of course, humans were not around to ask these questions for 99.9999% of cosmic history. So if the purpose of the universe was to create humans, then the cosmos was embarrassingly inefficient about it.
Here we have the first example of an actual argument. Now, obviously, this is a rhetorical argument. Neil is assuming that the universe probably doesn't have a purpose. And so he's asking a question from the perspective of someone who he thinks might believe that it does have a purpose. Well, maybe that purpose revolves around humans. After all, we are the ones asking the questions, so it makes sense to believe that maybe it has something to do with us. His argument goes, I believe, something like this. A, if the purpose of the universe is to create humans, then B, humans should be more present throughout cosmic history. Not B, humans are not more present throughout cosmic history, therefore not A, therefore the purpose of the universe is not to create humans. Now, I don't like this argument on a couple bases. One, I don't think the initial premise is true. I do not think that the purpose of the universe is to create humans. Rather, I would argue that the purpose of the universe is more akin to being a physical reality for physical creatures like us to exist. However, if we were to grant the initial premise anyway, I still think the conclusion doesn't follow from the premise. If the purpose of the universe is to create humans, then to be concerned over things like efficiency, well, these are the concerns of a creature that might not really have a lot of time to live. After all, we've got at best 80 years, and historically more like 5. And if we manage to get past childhood, we might be able to reach into our 30s, but likely we're gonna die. And so yes, time and efficiency matters to us as creatures. That makes sense. However, for a universe billions of years old, it's not gonna die after 30 to 80 years. It's gonna continue going with or without us. Perhaps the purpose of the universe is to create humans, And in all reality, it's less about being efficient, that we have to create humans as quickly as possible, but more about outcome, that as long as the humans are created, then the purpose is fulfilled. And so if the purpose of the universe is to create humans, I don't necessarily think it follows that we have to be in this universe for all of cosmic reality. Rather, we just need to exist eventually. However, his next argument is a little better.
And if a further purpose of the universe was to create a fertile cradle for life, then our cosmic environment has got an odd way of showing it. Life on Earth during more than 3.5 billion years of existence has been persistently assaulted by natural sources of mayhem, death, and destruction.
Now this is a better argument. Neil rhetorically supposes that the purpose of the universe is to be a cradle for life. Yet, the universe appears to be hostile towards that life because of various things like natural disasters and what have you. And so if the universe is hostile to life, then it cannot be the case that the purpose of the universe is to be a cradle for life. Now, once again, I don't particularly like this argument and I disagree. And so, we need to ask, what does Neil mean by cradle for life? Does he mean that all of the universe needs to be a cradle for life? Well, it can't be that, because you got all that vacuum and space and nothing for no life to exist. So it can't be every square inch of the universe. Perhaps when he says the universe being a cradle for life, what he means is pockets of the universe where life does exist. Life needs to be able to exist without hostility. In this argument, then Earth would be considered a cradle for life, and life needs to be able to exist without any hostility, any resistance, just have a good old time and not die. But once again, I don't particularly think that this is a great argument. Contrary to what Neil seems to argue, just because in a location life might die, therefore it can't be a cradle for life, as he seems to be arguing, or seems to be assuming, I would be more likely to argue that because there is life at all, and in fact an abundance of it, that this is a cradle for life. That just because there is the presence of death doesn't necessarily mean it can't also be a cradle for life. I'm looking outside my window right now. I see a hedge, I see bugs, I see some dead plants, and maybe I'll see my dog eventually. And if you go into the wilderness, into the forests, you'll see way more life. And so it seems that on Earth life flourishes, and life flourishes well. And just because there is the presence of death doesn't mean that Earth can't also qualify as a cradle for life. Sponsor. This video is sponsored by no one specifically, because we are too small to ever afford anyone giving me money to shill out to them. But do you like Christian memes? Do you like looking at little still images on Instagram, cringing and thinking to yourself, nothing original? Well, have I got the best news for you. Your boys over at Memes for Jesus Instagram page, guess what happened to them? Corporate takeover. Yes, it's run by faceless shills who don't give a toss about you and only really capital. And the original founders had to move on and start their own pages, so you can go and follow Meme Lord Monday. So if you want to support this channel with the work we do here, oh boy, look at this thing, then consider also supporting Meme Lord Monday over on Instagram. I do some stuff with them occasionally. I like what they do. You know, benefit us both. So also you can consider subscribing to my channel. Whoa son, it's not the end of the story yet. Put your pajamas back on. You're not going to school right now. You're gonna listen to the end of this story. Our armchair philosopher, he was at the end of the video, but then he noticed a little something. So, I noticed a little something. I'm not going to react anymore to the rest of the Minute Physics video. We're done. You want to go see the rest of the video? Sweet, you should do that. Link in the description. But, from the two arguments that were already set up by Neil, they go a little something like this. Neil is making an argument that I've heard before. The same logic that Neil is applying, I've heard being applied by other people. I'm going to make a comparison between Neil and the young Earth creationists. They both seem to agree that if the universe has a purpose, then humanity should be more present throughout cosmic history. And within 6 days, boom, bam, pop, humans, Adam and Eve and all that. And they both seem to agree that if the universe has a purpose, then there should be a lot less suffering in the universe. Potentially even to the degree of no suffering and no death. But because there is the presence of death and suffering for Neil, that means no purpose. And for the young Earth creationists, that means something went wacky wrong because, oh man, all wacky wrong things didn't happen at the very start. But it does seem to me that Neil and the young earthers here, they are both thinking on very similar logical lines. It's just Neil concludes in one direction, whereas the young earther concludes in another direction. But Theohopracy, you just don't want to embrace where the science goes. You just want to see the universe as you wish it to be, rather than how it is. And so, what is a better alternative? What direction can I take? If we were to take the Bible as it is written, then we would know that the universe began to exist in 6 whole days, 6 24-hour periods. And when we look at what the so-called scientists tell us in their fossil record, something smells a little cancerous. Oh, is that smell tumor? Prehistoric? Oh man, but the Bible says the creation was good, and in fact, very good. The standard of good has to be defined by God, and God is described as good, but yet he is perfect. Consequently, if the creation was good, it must be perfect. It doesn't seem to me that a fossil record with cancers and other things like
death, bloodshed, disease, suffering, animals
disease,
eating each other,
tumors. Do these things seem like a perfect world? I don't think so either. Faith and reason? Please. It's manifestly obvious that when you look at the, let's say, opening of Genesis, this is an account of nature. And it just seems to me that people who lived in these times had utterly no idea what the mechanisms of the universe is. They had no idea that, stars weren't gods, and they had no idea that the sky wasn't actually solid. And so when we look at these sources, what makes us also think that we could answer questions as to the purpose of the universe when in all reality they couldn't even begin to understand what the mechanisms and operations of them were. Faith and science, please, the two are irreconcilable. So it appears I have a choice to make. If the universe has a purpose, then there must be a purpose giver. That would be what we call God, I suppose. So perhaps I need to understand the intentions of this God in order to answer the primary question. But I'm a modern Westerner. I'm bombarded with information. I exist in a hyper-competitive marketplace which fights for my attention, where the loudest, most bombastic, and often simplistic voices rise to the top. And it appears as though I've only been given 2 options. So, which do I trust more? Science or religion? Easy question, beta cucks. Just like any other debated and contested, maybe even divisive issue, if we can't trust the literal plain reading of the Bible, more likely it is that you are going to encounter the most amount of truth. Today, it's not 6-day creation, and tomorrow, Jesus never existed. Nuance bros are just too scared to get off their fence. And then what are you going to do with your purpose question? To call the truth. Actually, I think John Walton and the Bible Project offer some really useful insights.
As I understand Genesis 1, it's an account of cosmic identity, trying to help people understand what this cosmos is, which includes what God's purposes were.
Nuance, bro! Nuance, bro! Did you just think maybe, shut up? We know what the purpose of the universe is. Maybe just, no. You think about that? You ever think that maybe you're just a little full of yourself to actually ever think that maybe the universe has maybe a little bit to do with you? No purpose giver, no purpose. What do you think about that? And we all know that fairies don't exist. I'm looking for them. Where are they? Fairies. I don't see any. The purpose of the universe? Your purpose giver is real, then maybe you should just put him in this jar. Whoa, what's that? Is someone denying Romans 1 and examine him to make sure that he is real? Wait, categorically incorrect? That sounds like a code trying to bewitch you with their promises of living by your own rules, living your best life. I'm tired and confused. I exist in a sea of noise. I've misplaced my left hand and my right. Where am I supposed to look in order to find up and down? What is our name? Where are we from? Where are we going? Why do we exist? I don't know the difference between my heart's beats and trembles, its joys and sorrow. The noise that escapes the mouths of these internet intellectuals is television static. Yet I'm supposed to trust them when they make claims to truth? If I'm supposed to know who this truth is, and we've not been formally introduced.
The only reason
I'm
why
tired
you
of
left
it
the
in
church
the
is
first place because you put your
faith in man and not God.
Either young earthers or absolute nothing.
Yeah.
Science can't talk about purpose. Okay, but that's what the Bible's most interested in. Okay, and again, that means that we're dealing with not competing truth claims, but different sorts of truth claims that actually can coexist.
Cringe, cringe, cringe.